Good afternoon, everyone. This is March the 2nd, 2022. It's Christine again. I thought the other night was very good. I'm glad Julie was finally able to express herself. And when I do videos, I like doing them in conversations because I never know what's going to come out, and it's honest and it's open. And I think people appreciate that. I know I do. We've been talking a lot now about mental health issues for a long time. Today I wanted to go a little bit more into what we were talking about on these PTSD and these nightmares that we have. And I wanted to express the kind of nightmares that I've had for some of the stuff that I've had to go through, like with that, and almost being strangled. And that wasn't my second husband. I had an episode with him too. But that's another story of nearly being strangled as well. But with my first husband, that was a nightmare for me for those 2 weeks, because that's all I could see was being on the bed again and him on top of me, strangling me, and wondering why. I mean, just like George Floyd was strangled, having that police officer on top of him and in uniform. And what made it even worse for me, it was not just some strange police officer in uniform. It was actually my husband that was strangling me, and I couldn't understand why. And then you look and you turn around and you're thinking, oh my God, what does it really mean when they swear in to serve and protect? I mean, and you're the housewife and you're getting the blunt end of something that you have no idea of what's actually occurring here. And it was... So I had nightmares again for those 2 weeks after watching that video with George Floyd being killed. And these are just how horrible the nightmares are. And I was back in that bed being strangled again. And then it brought me remembering another very vivid nightmare while I was still married to him in that last 6 months that I was married to him. He was apparently, back in those days, of course, pot was still illegal. And he told me about an episode of being in the police car, and he decided he was going to smoke a joint in the police car. And he was smoking this joint. He was parked in a parking lot, and apparently there was a noise. It was dark. There was noise outside. He rolled down the window, couldn't see anything. Then he heard another noise. He opened the door. Now and went for his revolver, and all of a sudden a raccoon comes out, and he almost shot the raccoon, thinking it was a prowler or someone trying to attack. He didn't know what to think, but he pulled his revolver, and he said he almost shot his revolver at the raccoon. That sent off nightmares for me. This was when he was falling apart, and I kept thinking, oh my God, what if that had been some person in need of help, or another police officer just seeing the cruiser too, just coming up to talk to him? What if he turned around and shot the poor person coming up? And so that set off a nightmare for me after he told me that incident, in which I had a very, very vivid nightmare. And I'd like to express what happened after he described the incident to me. Was that I saw myself behind the steering wheel. I was doing the same thing. I was smoking a joint, and all of a sudden I heard a noise, and I looked out, turned around, and all of a sudden, all I saw was these paws coming up. Well, first on the window of the door, and all of a sudden I saw this police cap with a badge on it, and then the face of a raccoon, in which I actually fired in my dream at this vision that I was seeing, and all I saw was red, but it was so vivid that I actually believed I shot someone, and or at least something. At that point, and it actually drove me, because I had been sleeping on the left side of the bed, where your steering wheel would be. I had actually pushed myself in the dream right across the bench seat of the police car and out the back door, where in reality I actually pushed myself across the queen size bed and ended up falling tangled up in the covers on the other side of the bed, and my dog was licking my face. And then I realized after that it was probably, because we lived near the highway, it was probably when I pulled the trigger in the dream that made it seem so real, was I heard a truck backfire. But just lying there on the floor, I was shaking. I was sure I'd shot someone or something. And of course, it was dark, and I was fumbling, trying to get out of the covers and trying to fumble for the light. And by the time I had the courage to even just climb up on the bed and take a peek over my side of the bed, I was so relieved to find out there was nothing on my side of the bed. I hadn't shot anything. But that was the kind of nightmares, and it was one I will never, ever forget having. But as I said, it was something that was really frightening to me, and I realized that he was getting very dangerous to be doing something like that. And that was just one of the many things that happened to me that caused the PTSD. And for what all the nightmares, this is what it's like having these nightmares. And for me, the only way I can live through these nightmares, because when I do have them, is that at night I have to have a fan blowing over me. Because as long as I have the fan blowing over me, if I have a nightmare and I'm waking up, as long as I can hear the fan blowing and I can actually feel the air, I know I'm alive. So this is how one way I have to deal with that at night. I don't have the nightmares as much anymore, but as a precaution, I still sleep with a fan blowing on me. So this is one of the ways I have to deal with it. Some of the other things that happened when I had nightmares, another one was when he came home, he'd be either doped up or he'd be drunk, and he'd come home, he'd take out his police revolver, he'd show me the revolver. Sometimes I actually saw him when he emptied the bullets out of the gun. He'd put them on the coffee table. Then he'd start pointing the empty gun at me and clicking the empty chamber, and I always just hoped that was all the bullets were there. And then there was other times he turned around and he put the bullets in his pocket, and I never knew if he got all the bullets out of the gun or not. But he used to do this to me and the dog. So this was another nightmare I had on guns. So, I mean, even today, I don't know how I would react if I had a gun pointed at me at this point. I know when I talked to the Indigenous veteran about the PTSD and that, he said, well, if that happens and it's a different situation, you'll know how to handle it. And I said, really? I hope so. Because I know my worst fear was going into a bank sometime and finding myself in the middle of a bank robbery or something. Because it was a fear I had. Because this is what you have that fear. Suddenly you've got maybe a bank robber in there. Suddenly the police are coming in with guns. It was a real fear that you have. So this is one of the other things that happened to me. Then again, another incident that happened to me again was, there was quite a number of incidents, but another incident was that finally prompted me to have to do something, was that absolutely terrified me, because we lived in a mobile home. We had a 6-foot boa constrictor. We had birds, many different types of birds. We also had the 2 dogs. I also had 30 guinea pigs. We had rats. We had all kinds of things. So it was like a pet shop. So the children would come in, and knowing full well that the children would come in, this particular day, I was cleaning, and I was getting something high up in the buffet, so I had the stool there. And the children knocked on the door because, well, my guinea pigs, of course, had just had babies, and being kids, they're trying to persuade mom and dad, can we have a baby, please? You know, the way children are. And I took them into the other room and into the spare bedroom. Didn't realize that little Christine she was about 4, she disappeared out of the room. The next thing I knew, I saw our dog going by the doorway, crouched on the floor, just crawling on the floor, and the only thing that made him do that would be my husband pulling his police revolver, pointing it at the dog, and the dog knew the difference between a real gun and a toy gun. And so I saw him going by, and then all of a sudden it dawned on me, oh my God, no. Because what had ended up happening was, by the time I got out the door, there she was. He'd left his police revolver right on the buffet where I'd been, and she got it out of the holster. I went round the corner. There she was. She was holding the revolver with her little fingers, trying to get on the trigger, and it was out of the holster, and she's looking at me innocently. Mrs. B, how do you fire this water pistol? And of course, was a shock to me. Of course, because I'd played with the children, there was a swimming pool. They were looking forward. This was May. They were looking forward to going back in the swimming pool and playing with the water blaster. So she thought she had a water blaster. in her hand. And all I remember was hearing my husband's voice saying, "Be calm, think." The first thing all I could do was think of, okay, Christine, see that giant spider there up in the ceiling? We got to destroy it. Okay, you two, seeing the two in the back room, the other two, and I said, go where the dog is. The dog is going underneath the bed. That's going to be the spaceship. You go run in the spaceship. And then so I had Christine, little Christine, and she's trying to point this big heavy gun that she's trying to hold in her little tiny hands up in the air. And of course, those particular revolvers, there's no safety catch on it, so you just pull a trigger and it fires. So, and I'm just pleading and hoping that if it does go off, it's only going to be a leak in the roof that we're going to have to fix. So I managed to get up behind her, and I gently took the gun out of her hands, and I turned around and said, okay, Christine, you run to the spaceship. Okay, I'll destroy the spider. You just run and be safe. So, and that was the only thing I could do, because when I walked out there, the gun and her, the front door was behind her, so I couldn't get her out the front door, or the kids out the front door. The back door behind us, being in a mobile home, it shifted in the winter, so the back door right behind me was locked, so I couldn't even get the two other children out the back door safely. And it was a very, very scary incident, but I managed to get the kids out safely out of the house, and I managed to collapse on the couch after, and all the things that, when it's going through my mind, all the things that could have possibly gone wrong were in my mind. And I was just shaking. I couldn't get off. And I remember actually going to the kitchen and curling up with a knife, trying to figure out, how do I protect myself against this? Like, I didn't ask for this. I mean, why didn't he put his gun up on the fridge like he used to? Why did he expect me to clean up after him? Because most of the time he came in and he just throw his uniform all over the place. I'd have to clean up after him. But this time he left his gun in the open. And he also knew that the children came in to see the animals that we had. And that was the way I lived, because literally at that time, after we were married, I was totally out in the boondocks. I was like 35 minutes out of Ottawa, and back in those days, you were out in the boondocks, because Ottawa was certainly not built up at that time, or out that time, because now we have, of course, amalgamated, and we have all the different counties and whatnot. But it was a very, very scary thing, and then I had to do something. And it was a horrible thing that I had to do. And everybody, why did I tattle on my husband? Well, I didn't exactly tattle on my husband. Alarmed and realizing at this point that things were getting out of hand, because there was so much going on. And I have a lot more to say that transpired during that 6 months. That to get it, what ended up happening was I turned around, I called my minister who married us, thinking, oh God, have I got marital problems? What's going on? How can I handle this? How can I deal with this? And, of course, he went to the police chaplain, the police chaplain went to the detectives, and then the detectives came to me to find out what was actually going on at the time. And I was worried. I mean, he was throwing his career down the drain. He was hanging around with these weird people that I didn't know. And, of course, I didn't drive, so I couldn't get into Ottawa. And so I was basically on my own trying to figure out what was going on, because I couldn't figure out what was going on. But basically, to put it in a nutshell, he got himself involved in drugs, gambling, and loan sharking, which has a full story behind it. So it's very hard to describe what happened at that particular time. And of course, I was forced to resign and from the police department. Of course, I got blamed for everything, but I was being put in danger. I also realized that there was other people in danger with his behavior too, and I did not know what to do. So it was not a matter of tattling on him, it was trying to resolve a problem. And back then, when police officers started falling apart, there was really no help for them, and even the families. And I think we're finding that today, that especially with our soldiers today coming back, and the families are still struggling to deal with all the stuff that's going on. So it still very much exists today. So I just wanted to give a short video. I've still got much more to say, and it wasn't all bad. There's a lot of funny things I can say, having been married to a police officer too, before all this came down. But I just wanted to give you a brief idea of what it's like when you go through trauma like this. You have nightmares. Sometimes I still see those children in danger and wondering, how did I talk myself out of that? And it was lucky that I did. I just remained calm and tried to do the best I could. But when you're a young woman and you suddenly found yourself into this kind of a situation, how do you deal with this? I don't know. I don't have the answers completely to that, but I know that mental health issues need to be talked about. The drug addiction is just out of control right now down here in this area, and I'm seeing a lot more bad things coming when this starts to happen. So I appreciate you again. I'm just trying to keep a short video, but it's hard because, like I said, you cannot put 40 years of trauma in 5-minute video or a 15, 20-minute video. So thank you again for listening to me, and I will come on again, and I appreciate all my viewers. And thank you. And have a good day, and we'll talk again soon.